Namaskar. Welcome to this session. We are commencing the Sutra 2.29. The 28th Sutra told us that by Yoganga Anushthana there is Ashuddhikshaya and Jnana Diptihi up to Viveka Khyati. So Yoganga Anushthana, Yoga, which is Ashtanga Yoga, and Anushtanam. Now, what are the Ashtangas? They are not mentioned in the previous sutra, but just reference to Ashtanga Yoga. And therefore, this sutra just mentions the names of the limbs or the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga. The sutra is yamaniyama asana pranayam pratyahara dharana dhyana samadhayoho ashtavangani. So, the famous and popular Ashtanga Yoga gets a mention here, that these are yamaniyama asana, pranayam, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana and samadhi. These are limbs of yoga. Now, previously mentioned practices, sadhanas, such as Abhya sadhana, Vairagya sadhana, then Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Prajna, and in Kriya Yoga, Tapas, Swadhyaya, Pranidhan. Now, this is composed of Ashtangas. So all the practices of Uttamadhikari, Madhyamadhikari, Adhamadhikari, they are composed of the 8 limbs. But however, for Uttamadhikari and Madhyamadhikari, Ashtanga Yoga comes in different manifestation where we are not able to identify them, however they are there. And on the Adhamadhikari plane, it has to be very particularized Ashtanga Yoga. All the 8 limbs must be particularized. So that's why this sutra is mentioning those 8 limbs. Vyasa doesn't have much to comment on the sutra. So therefore he says, because Patanjali also is going to mention the limbs as to how they are constituted and how is the effect and outcome. So therefore Vyasa briefly says, Yatha krama esham anushtanam swarupam cha vakshyamaha. So, gradually, one by one of these Ashtangas would be mentioned. And therefore, Vyasa says there is not much to say here. Point to be noted is that Patanjali is going to mention in the following part the Anushthana mode of Ashtanga Yoga practice. And I have said this in the beginning, in previous sessions, that Anushtana mode is the supreme mode and most essential mode which is going to give the fruit of yoga. But then Anushtanam, we were trying to ascertain as to what is Anushtanam in our earlier sessions. So, the Anushthan is only going to mention what Patanjali has mentioned. And as I said repeatedly, that we in this world today, when yoga is so popular, when it is so widely practiced, it is not Anushtanam, it is practice. At the most, we practice Ashtanga Yoga. We learn, we practice. But Anushthana is totally a different framework. So I will not say much about this because we have said on earlier occasions. So, only the limbs of yoga have got mentioned in the Sutra 2.29. And similar mention you get in other books and texts on yoga. Mandalabramanopanis says, Vedeshu cha ashtaguninam yoga ahu manishinaha. So here Mandalabramanopanis in the Vedic tradition, also Ashtanga Yoga was in vogue. It is not that only Patanjali brought the concept of Ashtanga Yoga, but prior to Patanjali, yoga was known as Ashtanga Yoga sadhana. The 8 limbs were well known, and that's how yoga has been from time immemorial. So Mandalabramanopanis in 1.1 says, Yama Ashtanga Yoga Uchyate. Yama etc. composes the Ashtanga Yoga. So Yama etc. limbs are called Ashtanga Yoga. Then in Jabaldars Upanishad also you come across Yoga Sashtanga Darshanam, which is 1.4, Jabaldars Upanishad. So Yoga Sashtanga Darshanam, Sa Ashtanga, Ashtanga Sahita. Shandilya Upanishad lists the Ashtangas in 1.1 at the opening hymn of Shandilya Upanishad. Yamaniyama asana pranayama pratyahara dharana dhyan samadhi ashtangani. The same Ashtangas have been mentioned prior to Patanjali. This is what we have to note. That Patanjali is not the one to really postulate Ashtanga Yoga, but it has been there traditionally. I remember another quotation from Smriti, Garuda Puranam, where there is a chapter called Brahmadhyana Vidhi. The 29th shloka there says, Muktihi Ashtanga Vijnanam. The Ashtanga Vijnan, Ashtanga Yoga is Mukti Sadhana, Moksha Sadhana. Then in Saura Puranam 12.1, 2 and 3, Mayyeka Chittata Yoga iti Purvam Nirupitam Sadhanani Ashtadha Tasya Pravakshyami Adhuna Shruno Yamascha Niyamasta Vasanadi Nyapi Shanmukha Pranayama Tata Prokta Pratyaharascha Dharana Dhyanam Tata Samadhischa Yoga Angani Prachakshate. So these 8 names of 8 limbs get mentioned in, as now quoted, Saura Purana. And in Pancharatra itself, which you should recall, was the Pancharatra text or Pancharatra discourse induced Patanjali to be author of Yoga Sutras. So in Ahirbuddha Samhita, chapter 31 and verses 15, 16 and 17, it is said there, Sanyogo yoga ityukto jivatma paramatmanaha ashtanga esha kathito yenatma drushyatam gataha ashtangani asya vakshyami prusaktani niramayah yamascha niyamascha iva asanam tadantaram pranayamas tatah prokta prana pratyaharascha dharana dhyanam tatha samadhischa etani narada. So same 8 limbs get mentioned in the primordial text, which is Pancharatra Samhita, and that is the Ahirbudnya Samhita. So the Ashtangas have been mentioned, and it is prior to Patanjali, right from time without beginning. The yoga tradition itself, which is ageless, had this concept of Ashtanga Yoga. The original speaker of yoga, as you should be aware and you should remember, it was Hiranyagarbha, that is Adi Narayan, Mahavishnu, who spoke of yoga in Pancharatra advices, Pancharatra discourses, and therein the same Ashtangas were mentioned. So original speaker of yoga also has referred to Ashtanga Yoga. So this is how the Ashtanga Yoga gets mentioned in the Sutra. Now, coming to that point, the process of Ashtanga Yoga other than Anushthana, so that ours also gets included in it. So there are steps to be taken. Ashtanga Yoga commences with Ashtanga Yoga Anushasanam. We must get initiated into Ashtanga Yoga. After getting initiated, we must have some knowledge about Ashtanga Yoga as to what is yoga. Then we will have to put up practice of it. Practicing yamaniyama, practicing yamaniyama, asana, pranayam, pratyahara, etc. So then comes the practice. The practice comes to learn something. It is not practice out of proficiency, because the practice is vague, unparticularized concept. If you are not getting something, you practice and get it. And when you are proficient, you practice again. So the word practice that is in vogue is also having two meanings. One is to learn something. Before proficiency, you practice something, and same thing is practiced once again after you are proficient. So that's how Ashtanga Yoga would be commencing. So after you practice, you understand the import and purport of Ashtanga Yoga. Then it is such a kind of practice for which one would start developing affiliation, interest, motivation, enthusiasm. So we will be starting to do something more enthusiastically, with some interest. Then a stage will come where you will feel that this is a very noble practice, and therefore you will be doing more dedicated practice. So Ashtanga Yoga will get place in daily life, routine life, daily life. So it will slowly start scoring priority. And it is because that one will start developing reverence. If not everyone, some of them will start revering the practices. If they get to know that this is something very noble practice, and also having some transcendence, so one will start developing reverence. So When you love something, how do you practice that? When you like something, how do you practice? When you start loving it, how do you practice? When you start developing devotion for it, how do you practice? And once you start developing reverence for it, how do you practice? So practice gets upgraded qualitatively. And then acme condition will be Anushtanam. So yoga becomes something which is matter of Anushtan, for which I have been telling you there is no English word. But before Anushtanam, there are so many stages which one has to cross over. There is no way that somebody can be straight away initiated into Anushtanam. Ashtanga Yoga should influence. And when it goes on influencing the practitioner, then the practice will be getting qualitatively upgraded, and pinnacle point of practice, the culture of practice, the mode of practice becomes something that is called Anushtanam. So, hereafter Patanjali is going to mention in something in a way as to how all these Ashtangas are practiced in Anusthana framework. He doesn't technically describe it because yoga cannot be technically prescribed. It is not standard mode of prescription to everyone, strong and weak and young and old and disposed and indisposed. So, even if you are aware of what yoga you are practicing, you are in particular age and now you are practicing that way. But if you were child, the practice would have been different. What you would have done would be different if you were 10 years younger, 20 years younger, 25 years younger, or 10 years older, 20 years older, 25 years older. So prescription cannot be there. It changes. It has to be customized. So preceptors, your teachers should customize your practice. It is not standard practice given for everyone, every time, any time, because of different material of each individual, because of age factor. That's to be accepted by anyone. How yoga would commence would depend upon what is your stage in life. Are you a child? Are you a teenager? Are you young? Are you adult? Are you old? So, how yoga would be catered or how yoga would enter your life depends upon your stage in life. It depends upon also your samskaric level, how much you have samskars of yoga or absence of it. If you don't have samskars, yet how the yoga would commence. So it cannot be prescribed. And that's why we need a preceptor, teacher who would guide us as to what would be our way to take up yoga, practice yoga. Because it is to be customized. And therefore Patanjali doesn't prescribe the practices technically, but they get prescribed by way of inference when he mentions the fruits, effects, consequences, such as consequence of Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Brahmacharya. So that will give us some guidelines that when all these Ashtangas are practiced genuinely, authentically, in Anusthana manner, how would be the effect? And from there one has to deduce the technique. How would be my technical mode to be attaining that fruit? And that's why there is no prescription. But the description can be arrived at by extrapolation, inference. So that is to be understood here. So after having mentioned these Ashtangas, he commences mentioning each of these. And again, as I said just now, he is not going to mention technical mode because it has to be customized. So first limb of Ashtanga Yoga is called Yama. And more extensively translated into English as restraints. So what is the first limb? It is Yama. What are these yamas? There are 5. Ahimsa, Satya, Steya, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha, Yamaha is the Sutra 2.30. It lists the 5 yamas. Because yamas are 5. So that's how we commences. What is Ahimsa is to be understood. Ahimsa is rendered as non-killing, non-injury, non-hurting. Ahimsa, himsa is to vex and torment someone or kill someone, injure someone. So there is vandalism in himsa. Himsa is vandalism. And not to be in it is ahimsa. So that's how ahimsa has to be understood. It is generally rendered as non-killing or non-injury. The satya, veracity, truthfulness. Then comes asteya, abstinence from stealing, theft. Then comes brahmacharya, which is rendered as continence, which is again not justifiable translation that you get in English or other languages. There will be equivalent to continence in other languages as well. So also the veracity and truthfulness is not the complete essence of satya. So we'll be seeing what satya is and what asteya is. It's not just non-stealing, because we can easily say, I am not a thief, I don't steal. So that means I am in asteya. So that would be misconception. Anyway, we will be seeing those meanings of those. So ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha, non-avariciousness, non-hoarding is what is the rendering of it, which is again unjustifiable. What I am trying to say, there is no English or any other language having equivalent to ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha. So these words should be retained as they are, and we should try to understand the implications and nuances by really going into traditional texts which describe what is ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha, and there will be no chance to render them into another language, other language. These should be rendered as technical terms, must be retained as technical terms. So anyway, we will be trying to decipher what are these 5 yamas in the following part. The point is that 2.30 is just naming the 5 yamas. And such mention is again supported by the texts, scriptural texts, the Shastras. So let me cite few examples here so that you will know how the 5 yamas have been postulates prior to Patanjali. The Saura Purana, to cite 12.3 and 4, they mention the same 5 yamas. Ahimsa, satyam, asteyam, brahmacharya, aparigraho, jayaha, sankshekwataha, poproktaha. So you will get the mention of same 5 yamas. Linga Puranam has a topic called Ashtanga Yoga Yukta Shivaradhana Vidhi. worshipping Shiva uh, in the framework of Ashtanga Yoga. And therefore, there in Linga Puranam, you get description of the Ashtanga Yoga. And there you come across mention of Yamas. Ahimsa prathamo hetuhu, yamasya yaminam varaha, satyam asteyam param brahmacharyam aparigrahu. So it gets mentioned similarly. In the same passage, the 9th verse, Ahimsadi yama proktaha is what Linga Puranam says. So we can see the mention of the same yamas in some of the classical texts. Then coming to Garuda Puranam, there is a chapter in the first half of Garuda Puranam, there is a chapter called Brahma Dhyan. So there you get a mention in the verse 29 and 30. Yama panchatvam himsadya ahimsa prani ahimsanam satyabhutahitam vakyam asteyam asangraha param amaithunam brahmacharyam sarvatyago aparigraha. A little meaning has been given in the verses of Garuda Puranam. But point is, same 5 yamas are getting mentioned. I recall Kurma Purana having a chapter called Pashupasha Vimoksha Yoga, bondage removing yoga. So, there in the 13th verse, Yama Sanksheptaha Prokta Tichitta Shuddhi Pradhanram. That is how it commences. And you get description of Ashtanga in the passage of Karma Puranam. In Vishnu Puranam 6.7.36, it says, Brahmacharya Ahimsa cha Satyasteya Parigrahan. So 5 yamas are mentioned, but in different order. But the same 5 yamas are mentioned in Vishnu Puranam as well. It will be interesting to note that in some of the Shastras, Shastra Granthas, we come across mention of 10 yamas. So there will be 10 yamas and 10 niyamas rather than 5 yamas and 5 niyamas. But the purport is that even in 10 they are implying the 5 yamas and 5 niyamas. So 5 and 5 plus yamas and niyamas become 10, but in Shastra you will come across 10 plus 10 concept also. So it is important to make you familiar with the set of 10 yamas. In Ayurveda Samhita 32.18, you get the mention of 10 yamas. What are those? See, you again find the 5 included there and something that is allied to 5, allies to 5. Satyam, Daya, Dhruti, Shaucham, Brahmacharya, Kshama, Arjavam, Mitaharas Tatha Asteyam, Ahimseti Yama Dashaha. So these are the 10 yamas which you find in Ayurveda Samhita. Satyam, Daya, Daya means compassion, Dhruti, Dhruti means the firmity of buddhi, Shaucham, Brahmacharyam, Shaucham is purity, Brahmacharyam, Kshama, Kshama means pardoning nature, Arjavam, the straightforwardness, Mitaharas Tatha Asteyam, Mitahara means balanced intakes, and Asteyam Ahimsa iti Yama Dasha. So these are the 10 yamas in Ahirbudhnya Samhita. So Yogi Yajnavalkya Smriti 7.159 has mention of the 10. Ahimsa satyam asteyam shaucham indriya nigraha dama shama arjavam danam sarvesham dharma sadhanam. So here also you come across mention of 10 yamas. Then in Darshanopanishad also you get the mention of 10 yamas in 1.6 mantra in Darshanopanishad. Ahimsa satyam asteyam brahmacharya dayarjavam kshama dhruti mitahara shaucham cheti yama dashaha. So also in Varahopanishad 5.12 and which is repeated in Shandilya Upanishad 1.4, Ahimsa satyam asteyam brahmacharya daya arjavam kshama dhruti mitahara shaucham cheti yama dashaha. So there you also come across mention of 10 yamas which have some of the niyamas coming in. But it is the same ethos. Whether it is 5 yamas or 10 yamas, it is the ethos is same. So the Shastras have mention of 5 as well as 10. Now we will have to commence understanding these 5 yamas. Because Patanjali is not going to describe the 5 yamas. He is going to mention the fructification, the effect of 5 yamas in Anushthana. From there we have to deduce, get some direction for what are yamas, what is Ahimsa, what is Satya. So now we are going to commence understanding these yamas, 5 yamas, by delineating it. It is to be noted here that Patanjali has also mentioned that these yamas can be Mahavratam. They can be great vows. And now you get one kind of input for your thought. In Anushtanam, there must be vratam. Anushtanam must be a vow. Not that yoga is practiced because I like it, I am interested in it, and I practice regularly. I don't fail, I don't miss. But it must be a vow. Vrata. So the vrata mode of yamaniyamas, vrata mode of asana pranayama, etc. is what is expected in Anushtanam. So he brings the concept of vratam, that is vow. And he mentions 2 forms of vows. One is Mahavrata, the other one is Anuvrata. So one has to first adhere to Anuvrata, atomic vow. And when you develop proficiency, you can make it more and more strict, more and more scrupulous, more and more intensified, and ultimately it can go to level of great vow. So these principles are not moral ethical principles, but something with regards to which one can take a vow in life. So when the vow is taken with some limited time space situation, it is called Anuvrata. So limited vow, I am going to adhere to this for a week, for a day, for some hours, for 10 days. You cannot be doing with our mundanity, gravities, we cannot be just living in those vows. So we will have to take limited vows and slowly inculcate the habit and power to practice vratas. So the chronological range would increase. First taking a small dose and then little larger dose and further larger dose, so that you do not violate it. So there is something called Anuvratam, which is limited by time, space, situation, etc. The Mahavrata is not limited by time, space, situation, scenario, conditions, etc. So Patanjali is going to mention vratas, Mahavrata and that is expressed and Anuvrata to be deduced. So Mahavrata is said to be Sarvabhauma. Come what may, I won't violate. It is Anavachinna Vrata. It is not limited by anything such as time, space, situation, conditions, scenarios. So yamas and niyamas are not moral ethical practices, but those are kinds of vows. So we will get some indication as to what are yamas and niyamas, where you can take a vow. And that means we get some direction for what is really Anushthana. Anyway, the Yama Panchaka, the 5 yamas, the set of 5 yamas, which are Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha, these are prescribed in 2 forms. One is Anuvrata, atomic vow. The other one is Mahavrata, which is great vow. So now we are going to proceed to delineate on these 5 yamas. The first one is Ahimsa. What is this Ahimsa? It is literally rendered as non-killing and non-injury. If you don't injure someone, if you don't kill someone, if you never injure or kill someone, you think you are in Ahimsa Vrata. Because that's how the meaning is taken today. So Tatra Ahimsa Sarvatha Sarvada Sarvabhutanam Anabhidrohaha. A beautiful definition of Ahimsa comes in Vyasa Bhashya. So Vyasa is defining. So the work is relegated to Vyasa by Patanjali to describe the yamas and niyamas and ashtangas. So Patanjali, Vyasa therefore does wonderfully well in just one statement. It has unfathomable depth and extent. Tatra, there, amongst the 5 yamas, Ahimsa. What is it? Sarvatha, Sarvada, Sarvabhutanam, Anabhidroha. So basically, Anabhidroha, having no droha. Droha means malice in the mind by way of anger, etc., dislike, hatred. So not to have hatred, basically, not to hate, is important aspect of Ahimsa. If you are hating someone, you definitely have Himsa in your conduct with regards to the thing or the person for whom you have hate. Avarice or malice. So not to have that is Anabhidroha. Now Anabhidroha to whom? Sarvabhutanam. All living beings. It is not just human to human, but Sarvabhutanam, all beings. Now how? In what quality and quantity? Sarvatha. That means completely, with no exclusions. You can't say I will exclude my enemy, I will exclude my antagonizers, and then I practice Himsa for everyone else. So it should be sarvatha, no one excluded, everyone included, sarvada, all the time, with no intervals, intermissions, breaks. So relentlessly, anabhidroha. Otherwise, sometimes we have hate for someone and then it goes away, again comes and again goes away. So, sarvatha sarvada is a beautiful implication. And that's why Vyasa tells us, Ahimsa sarvatha sarvada sarvabhutanam anabhidroha. So, these predicates are so important for one to really deliberate on it. Sarvatha sarvada sarvabhutanam. So, sarvatha means absolutely, completely. Sarvada means sadodit, always, any time, and all the times. Not to harm pranis, not to harm creatures, animals, birds, insects, human beings, or any kind of life form. So, not to allow any pida, any problem, any agony reaching the beings, to thwart any such thing, and also not to have droha. Basically, that is very important. Adroham is important. That is ahimsa. You can say otherwise, I don't kill anyone, I don't harm anyone, but don't you think ill of them? You think ill of them, that means that is violation of ahimsa. You may not be killing, you may not be inflicting any such injury or life threat, or you may not be killing someone or may not be harming someone physically. However, in your mind, you have enmity, animosity. That is not ahimsa. So ahimsa is not only in your motor system, preventing any kind of himsa in motor system and your activity of the body, but also in the activity of your mind and speech, kaya, vacha, manasa. So not to inflict any droha, not to have any droha in mind. That is important for ahimsa vrata. Now ahimsa gets mentioned first in all yamas, because by analysis we will understand ahimsa is all pervasive. You can't say that ahimsa is practiced but satya is not practiced. It's an elephant step. It's an elephant foot. So, when it comes to ahimsa vrata, you can't say that I am in ahimsa but I violate satya, I violate asteya, brahmacharya. Then that is not ahimsa. This is to be understood what ahimsa is according to Shastras. So ahimsa becomes something fundamental, primary for all the rest of the yamas. You can't say I will not practice ahimsa but I will practice satya, or I will practice asteya or brahmacharya or aparigraha. Not possible. Ahimsa, that adroha bhava is so important to be practicing any of the rest of the yamas. So there is pradhanyam, importance to ahimsa. And therefore ahimsa has lot of praise in Shastras. The following yamas have roots in ahimsa. This is what we have to understand. It is not only that it gets a first place. All the rest, satya, steya, brahmacharya, parigraha, have roots in ahimsa. And they are all because of ahimsa. They should be all because of ahimsa in yoga dharma. So Vyasa makes it clear, Uttare cha yamaniyama stanmulaha stat siddhi paratayaiva upadiyante. So rest of the yamas and even niyamas and everything, rest, is all ahimsa mulaka. It has roots in ahimsa. And for ahimsa siddhi, all those also need to be perfected. So that is why we come across mention that ahimsa paramo dharmaha. See, ahimsa is a dharma. It is not a behavior. It is not a practice. It is not morality, ethicality that is being mentioned here. But ahimsa paramo dharmaha is what Mahabharata tells us. And that is why what is being mentioned by Patanjali in Ashtanga Yoga is called ethico-religious system. Dharma niti mimamsa, dharma niti pranali, dharma niti sadhana. So this is dharma sadhana. Yoga practice is dharma sadhana. The point is ahimsa is at the root of all those. To improve the ahimsa, you will have to also adhere to satya, asteya, brahmacharya, parigraha. So the ahimsa will fully bloom and blossom because of other 4 yamas. It is not one of the 5 yamas. So understand the integral aspect here. Vyasa has clearly said that if the ahimsa is to be full bloomed, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, parigraha must be there. So that's how we will be having some basis to characterize what ahimsa is. So this is how we have commenced on understanding first of the yamas, ahimsa. But I think that should be enough for the time being. We will proceed on this aspect in our next session. There is much to say about ahimsa. I have just commenced. So we will take up ahimsa in our next session with a greater depth. So enough for the day. Namaskar all of you.